Short time ago, I did a video on this book and how I reckon it is crucial in me gaining a love of science fiction films. All right, and this is from 1971. This book was 1971. All right, by Mr. Denis Gifford. And I owe Mr. Denis Gifford an awful lot because here, Denis Gifford, 1971. Here, Denis Gifford with two Fs, but I'm guessing it's the same guy, from 1977, A Pictorial History of Horror Movies, which I seem to recall is the very first horror book I ever got. And I say the first because I don't know if it's the same elsewhere in the world, but here in the UK, for a reason I've never been able to find out, in the mid 1970s, there was a massive release of books and paraphernalia on horror films, be it hardback books, softback books, poster magazines like Deskin's Monster Magazine, the bubblegum cards, which were, bubblegum cards with photos from the Universal films and B movies with terrible jokes in speech balloons. There seemed to be this massive production on things related to horror movies at a time when horror movies weren't that big. Hammer films were on their knees and on their way out. And horror films, we were moving over into the more cerebral type of horror, a la Rosemary's Baby and what have you. But all of a sudden there's this massive look backwards to the past history of horror films. And I ain't going to object. I think this is 77. This is about the same time that, again, Deskin came out with his Hammer magazine. So it's about the same time. But this is the one that I've always cherished because it's hardback, it's big, it's got the most amazing, fantastic cover. You've got that on the front and you've got that on the back. All right. Look at that. Where is the original art for this now, So I thought I would have a quick flick through and show you what the teenage me was getting entranced by, just in the same way this book got me into science fiction. I think it's this book, along with the works of Deskin, that got me into horror movies. So 1977, it was not the original, not like that science fiction one. This is like the third or fourth printing in 77. For the princely sum of £2.95. Can you get any book now for £2.95? I don't think so. I haven't read this book for a very long time, and I don't know if back then I really did read it that much then. I was just, captivated by the photos, A lot of them are rather odd. Boris. This was my first exposure to an awful lot of things. I mean, I already knew the Karloff Frankenstein from the Aurora kits, but I think this is the first time I ever saw the abominable Dr. Phibes. I think this is where I was introduced to the work of Georges Méliès, which I adore. I mean, I adored them as moving films, but I adore them as stills. I think this is the very first time I was aware of Lon Chaney Sr.'s Phantom of the Opera. But you've got odd things. There are very strange things in here, images from films I've never heard of and even to this day have never seen, It's like this one here. I always thought that was a bit odd. If you want to pause, this is showing you what they all are. A shipboard shriek in Shokiko's Living Skeleton, 1968. Right? So it's a fantastic... look at that. I mean, look, that's Georges Méliès himself as Satan. alongside, is this The Colossal Beast? I think it's The Colossal Beast. I haven't looked at this for ages, just like the science fiction book. So I'm just Victor Madden, you know. I know from Doctor Who and comedies and stuff, but here he is as a hunchback. First time I was aware of that, you know. It's a brilliant book. I mean, if you ever see it, House on Haunted Hill, got to do that on Effectively Speaking at some point, that sequence. And, you know, most probably a love letter to Vincent Price, that will be. Old Peter with the skull. Yeah, just brilliant choice of images, you know, from literally the birth of cinema, going up, I guess, to when this was first printed, which was, I don't know, 73, 74. But look, Charles Ogle, the very first Frankenstein, 1910. Look at that. I remember studying that photo. It's amazing. This is, you know, like 5 or 6 years, the Golem. 5 or 6 years after I was obsessed by the little Denis Gifford book, I was doing the same thing. I, again, studied photos. This one I remember. This is the Golem, the 70s version with Roddy McDowall. I saw that on BBC once, late one night. I'm not sure, I've got to look into it. I don't think that's available anywhere. I don't know why, copyright or something, but I remember that as being a terrific film. Dr. Caligari. Yeah, he's grouped these into, you know, themes. So look, shadow, shudder. So yeah, we've got to have shadows everywhere. If I go back and read it, well, it's going to be very dated, isn't it? You know, it's way out of date, this book. And I can't remember just how much of a fan he is of certain, you know, film companies' output. I must go back and reread. But yeah, I just thought, look at that for a compare and contrast. Look. Lon James. Lon James. Apologies if you're a fan of Mr. Cagney's version, but nah. Yeah, so, you know, we've got horror, but in the horror, we've also got, you know, potential superstitious stories. Remember that one? That's the cat and the canary, isn't it? I remember that photo. Man who laughs. Yeah, no, it's brilliant. I don't want to waste your time too much. Let me take a large jump through it. I don't want to go through it. It's going to be a bit tedious. But, I mean, you turn the page and pretty much every page has a fabulous image. Oh, that one. That one there. Now, that's St. George and the Seven Curses, isn't it? I've got to watch that. I mean, even now, you know, in 2023, I consider myself a fan of science fiction and horror. But you go back to this book from 1977, and there's films in here that I still haven't seen. Maybe that should be a nice little project for me to seek some of these ones out. Gapper. I think, as I say, much like the science fiction film book, this one was instrumental in getting me into horror films, and especially imagery of horror films. You know, that's Donovan's Brain, which when I finally saw it, it's like, wow. And, you know, in both cases, it's Mr. Gifford, isn't it? I don't know if it's his idea to actually, you know, thematically link photos, i.e. girl being menaced by a claw coming into shot, giant monsters and stuff. I don't know, but I know this was instrumental in, you know, me gaining a love for, see, we're more up to date now, a love for, you know, horror films from all the decades. What a way to finish. I mean, you know, we've got, you know, Charles Ogle as the very first Frankenstein, 1910. You've got Georges Méliès with his output in Victorian times. And it ends on Harry H. Corbett from one of the best films ever made, Carry On Screaming. So I don't think Mr. Gifford is around anymore. But Mr. Gifford, if you're up there watching, kind of doubtful, thank you so much.